Thank you so much for watching this episode of She Dreams in Color video series. It is important that we tell you that there is dialogue in this interview that could be triggering on the topics of suicide and depression.
Your brain is a physical entity and it gets sick exactly the way your heart could get sick, you could break an arm, you could get cancer, and yet we have this.
Life's a short and precious thing, sweet like honey, and it sure can sting, sure can sting.
I'm excited about today's episode of She Dreams in Color video series because this is a woman I met accidentally, but clearly very intentionally. Dr. Deborah Bosley and I took a class together at Queen's University. One of those language classes is really, why would you do that? But at the same time, I think that's what drew us together. Yes. Of course, we would both do that. So Deborah, thank you for being here today to talk about your occupation and your obstacle and getting to know you through the Queen's University course and finding out what your occupation was. It blew my mind because I thought, I don't know anyone else who does what you do at all. So talk to me about your job.
I'm the founder and the principal of the Plain Language Group, which means that I help companies in technology, finance, health, and government agencies write information and content that's clear and easy for people to understand. So I translate complex information into clarity.
And one of the things I love to do when I meet someone to try to understand something about them, I try to apply it to my direct life. And the way that I do that with your business is I sign up for social media and I have to agree to terms of use.
Correct.
And I'm like, who reads this? And I'm like, yeah, of course. You know, 15 seconds later, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about what that terms of use actually means, what you see in your expertise for users such as myself.
The terms of use really is there to protect the company. So you're essentially giving them permission in many cases to use your information in ways that you're not necessarily knowledgeable about, right? And we like to say that I agree, I have read and I agree is the biggest lie in America because nobody reads it. And I think in some ways the intention is that nobody should read it. And yet I find it a bit extortive because you can't use the website or whatever unless you agree. So everybody just agrees. But in that agreement, there was a company, and they embedded in that if you sign this, if you agree, you are relinquishing your soul for all eternity. And another one put in, you are willing to give up your firstborn child. And you know, everybody agree, because people don't read it. They don't read it because they're so dense, complex, you know, wordy, jargony, written by lawyers. So when people say, well, nobody reads anymore, I go, well, there's a reason. We've been trained not to. So what I try to do is help companies understand that it builds customer trust, it builds customer loyalty, it increases profits, and it's great for their brand if everything I receive, even written by a lawyer, is something that I can understand. And I think people have a right to understand information that affects their lives. And yet, so much of the most important things that we, explanation of benefits, release papers from the hospitals, lab results, technology, you know, instructions, your financial statement, if we don't understand it, how can we make informed decisions? So that's my passion, and I will do this until I just can't see or my brain stops working because it's my passion.
How does this find you? How do you find it? It's so specific and it's so technical. What about your makeup draws you to this? Or what about your childhood drew you to this?
Well, that's an interesting, my mother taught me how to read when I was 4 by having me learn the headlines in the newspapers, which I thought my mother was very smart. I thought that's great. We can pass that on to everyone with children, headlines. And then our house was full of books. So reading was always, it was both my escape and it was my way of having something in common with my mother, and just words and language really spoke to me early in my childhood. Then when I went to college, I had no idea what I was going to major in. I thought I'd major in biology until I learned what I had to take, like chemistry. And then my advisor said, well, what do you like to do? I said, I like to read. And he said, well, you should be an English major. And I said, okay. And so that was it. And it fit perfectly with, you know, my interest in language and reading, et cetera, et cetera. So back in those days, women mostly could become teachers or nurses. And so having a degree in English would always have allowed me to be a teacher. Thank God it's not that way anymore.
And you have been a professor
yes.
at UNC Charlotte.
Correct.
So you did take the education pathway.
I did.
But
yes.
you, over time, things changed for women, and
yes.
you were able to jump into being an entrepreneur and having your own business and
yes.
working with Fortune 500s globally, international 500s, right?
Yes, correct.
So when did that happen? When did the transition from, I don't have to be a teacher, and obviously a university professor is very lucrative, or not lucrative.
Yeah, I'll correct you on that one.
Wrong word,
yes.
prestigious. Prestigious.
Well,
it is
maybe.
Prestigious and something to absolutely be proud of that accomplishment,
Sure.
but being an entrepreneur, it has to be fulfilling in such a different way. When did you see that you were able to take that pathway?
Well, oddly enough, in a way I've been an entrepreneur all my life, but it kind of accidentally, because years ago, I'll confess, I was a hippie, and I was a bookbinder, and I just created this little bittersweet bindery and did bookbinding for some letterpress printers. Then over time, I ended up getting a Ph.D. And professors are actually very entrepreneurial because we don't really have a boss, you know, as long as you do what you're supposed to do. But what happened to move me from professor to the kind of work I do now was at one point the chair of the English department came to my office and said, I got a call from First Union, and their risk management group is looking for somebody that can help their hedge fund marketers write better proposals. Is this something you're interested in doing? Well, I had no idea what a hedge fund was. I'd never done anything in a bank, but my philosophy of life is say yes and then figure it out, right? So I said, sure, of course. And I spent 3 years off and on with First Union, helping them. And at one point, I said to the guy who hired me, I said, you know, instead of paying me a fee, how about if you just give me 1% of every hedge fund that you sell because of how good the proposals are? He said, well, that's a very funny idea, Deborah, but thank you for bringing it up. But so that got me into, really, it got me into not just the passion of making things clear for non-experts, but it got me into the passion of being able to be an anthropologist, because I had to go into a tribe I didn't understand, with rituals and customs I didn't understand, using language that I didn't understand, and I had to learn all of that. And so I sort of felt like, okay, this is what it must feel like to have been Margaret Mead, or, you know, an anthropologist, to unpack what is this culture all about, and then to be able to bring my expertise in and add that to their, you know, the way they saw the world and what they thought was important. So from that, I thought, wow, I really, you know, I like this. And First Union was a good thing at that time to start me out. And then Dodd-Frank in 2008, suddenly all of these financial disclosures were now required to be written in plain language. And the truth is, no matter how well the banks and investment firms, et cetera, tried to do that, they were not really very good at it, and they had a lot of resistance to it for all kinds of reasons. But my phone started ringing, and it just kept ringing, and for whatever it is now, 20 years or roughly, people know who I am, and, you know, I feel silly saying it, but like in my field, I am famous.
It's interesting to hear you say I feel silly saying it, because you know, there are times where I look back on the things I've already done in my short career and I feel like, am I lying about that? Did I actually do that? Am I misremembering the extent to which my career has taken me?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm hoping I would get over that, but for you to say, I feel silly, you are so accomplished and truly an expert that wouldn't be questioned, even though you may always be learning and evolving
Sure.
with the industry. You're truly an expert in what you do, and you've testified in trials, and, you know, you've done the work and laid the foundation. So that feeling of feeling silly, I just don't think I hear men say that.
Well, that's how deep it goes within women to somehow apologize or to preface anything that might sound like bragging. And I think that's something we need to get over, right? Because why shouldn't I be able to say, here are all my accomplishments, wow, look at me, right? And you're right, men never have to, in fact, research will show that they have far more confidence in their ability than they actually have ability. We tend to do the opposite. And so thank you for that. From now on, I'll just say, hey, I'm famous. I'll leave out the I'm silly part. That, you know.
Well, and the other thing you said, too, is a common thing, you know, I hate to pit the sexes against each other, but it's a common thing I've seen in business, and I'm in a male-dominated industry in videography, which is they say yes and figure it out.
Yes.
Women want to know that they can do it before they say yes, or they at least want to have an 85, 90% grasp of the concept. And, you know, I was in a business relationship with a man who kind of led the way saying yes, and I was part of the team to figure it out. And that really opened my eyes to, oh, wow, maybe we don't know it. You know, a lot of people don't know what they're doing, but they know a little bit about it. You know, the elements of it, and you just figure it out.
Sure, exactly.
That's
exactly.
funny. But at the same time, Deborah, I was just thinking about this morning. Women and minorities have a lot less room to make mistakes.
Correct.
When we fail, when we have an oversight, when we forget something, when something doesn't go right out of our control, somehow it's attached to our gender or our race. And that's unfair. And that hopefully is a stigma that we can fight against in platforms such as this, to say, this woman is accomplished and we're not going to apologize about it.
And it has nothing to do with, you know, I will say it has nothing to do with my gender. I'm not accomplished because I'm a woman, but I'm not accomplished. Maybe I am accomplished in spite of being a woman, but I don't know that. Mm-hmm. In the field I'm in, probably the expectation is that this is more of a woman thing, working with language and, you know, English and all of that. But, yeah, I don't think gender is an issue, for me, at least.
So what issues have you faced in your journey of life? You know, another topic that we have here on the video series is occupation and obstacles. So what has been your obstacle that you can kind of say, I tackled that mountain?
So I will say, and I am a strong advocate for this, that I went through a period of my life where I suffered from clinical depression. And I was really almost incapable of doing much of anything. And through just a series of random events, I ended up getting a job because I had a master's degree in English. I ended up getting a job teaching at a university while I was, you know, seeing a psychiatrist, medication, all of that. And that experience led me from a place of really complete darkness to the famous person that I am today, because I was able, with the help of others, to not get over, that's not the right word, but to rise above. And so that is an obstacle, and I think actually that is an obstacle for men and women, but for a lot of women, this issue of depression, whether the depression is caused by a situation or whether, you know, your brain is a physical entity and it gets sick exactly the way your heart could get sick, you could break an arm, you could get cancer, and yet we have this sense that somehow it's a failing, it's a weakness. And so I want people to get over that and just realize that your brain gets sick. So but the obstacle is, for at least the way I think of it, that obstacle was something I was able to overcome that then led me to the rest of my life. And it's an obstacle that many people can get over if they seek appropriate help. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm really a strong advocate for an obstacle that can be helped. Mm-hmm. That was probably the biggest obstacle I had to get over in order to continue to have a life. But I do think that's one of those obstacles that people should be proud of getting over. They should feel proud that they got help. They should feel good about the kind of life they can have after dealing with that. So I just think it's really important for people to understand that you can rise above with proper help and go on to have a very successful life.
Can you explain a little bit about clinical depression and what that is, what it feels like? I don't understand, and so I was like someone who knows firsthand to tell. What is it? How are you diagnosed? And then how does that manifest in your life? What does it show up as?
Well, back in the day when it was happening, it first showed up as anxiety and panic attacks. And then I don't know exactly the chemistry of it because that's what we're talking about. But, you know, there's a drop in what they call serotonin. And the way it manifests itself is almost an inability to do much of anything. And so it involves a lot of lying around, maybe watching TV constantly, having really not having any positive emotions at all, and a feeling of helplessness. And this is why it often leads to suicide. So you can think, I really should eat something, and an hour and a half later you're still just saying, I think I should eat something. So it takes away that desire. But interestingly enough, which I found kind of shocking, is that my intellectual part of my brain was still capable. I was still capable of reading. I was still dealing with the depression when I went back to grad school to get my doctorate. So it interfered far more with my sense of self and my emotions than it did with my intellect. So I feel very grateful that I was able to move forward in my life while I was still dealing with that. And over time, it became something that could be managed.
It really can be something so difficult to empathize with if you haven't experienced it.
Yes.
But if you've ever had an episode of postpartum or, just situational depression,
yes,
it's so real. It's so real. And it's fascinating because with all newborns, they even measure the will to thrive. They measure that on a newborn, but we never talk about it the rest of our lives.
Correct.
For our human interaction.
Correct. And I love that phrase, the will to thrive, because you lose your will to thrive. That's a great way to put it. So in any case, for me, it's important to just say it out loud that it happened, 40 years ago. And I would never say I'm glad it happened, but at the same time, I would not have the life I had today had I not gone through that in my life.
Why is that? Who was there to guide you? Because 40 years ago, we were not talking publicly about suicide.
No.
We didn't see it on TV. We didn't share it even in our circles. It was like, this happened, depression happened, and it was under the rug. So who was there to guide you, or what did you dig into to pull yourself to the resources you needed?
Well, at the time, I never thought about suicide, so I was lucky. But I moved from where I lived and moved back home with my parents, frankly. So it was maybe, well, I'm not going to say how old I was because it's hard to believe I'm even 40, right? So anyway, moved back in with my parents. And then just through random circumstances, our neighbor was the chair of the English department of this private university. And he knew I had a master's degree in English and they needed somebody to teach freshman composition. And so But I had already started taking a kind of antidepressant, and so I was already working somewhat toward coming out of that. And then there's, you know, I was mismedicated. I mean, there's all kinds of, because back then they barely knew what anxiety attacks were.
Still now.
Right? Well,
Still
even now,
it's
panic
so
attacks.
misunderstood.
It is totally
People
misunderstood.
are over-medicated, under-medicated, mismedicated. It's
the wrong therapist.
Yeah.
But for me, the worst, why it remains such a dire obstacle is because we don't associate it as a physical illness. We associate it with a lack of character or weakness or, you know, particularly with men who tend to seek therapy far less often than women do. You know, it's a sign a man should be able to deal with this. But I want people to understand that every part of your body will at some point, or can at some point, get sick. And all it is your brain gets sick. So I think it's important to talk about it. I think it's important to get it out of the shadows. And even at the university, I used to give talks in the nursing college to students who were going to become nurses, and during the, I guess it was a class for psychiatric nursing. And I would ask the class, I said, all right, I'm not going to make you out yourself in any way about this, but if you yourself, anyone you know, or anyone in your family you think is suffering from depression, raise your hand. And every single hand goes up in that room. And yet, I would bet that many of those kids have not talked about it. Their parents haven't talked about it. Whoever they know is suffering from it hasn't talked about it. And so I think, you know, enough is enough with this. Like, this is such an important obstacle that so many people go through and you can thrive after, but we have to really start talking about this.
Well, and then the immediate next step from talking is action.
Correct.
Because we know access to therapy is not even remotely where it needs to be. Access to healthcare, medication, experts is not where it needs to be. And it's even worse in marginalized communities who suffer higher rates. So the next step has to be some kind of healthcare reform, mental health reform on top of it. And one thing the She Dreams in Color Foundation will be raising, the She Dreams in Color Foundation will be raising money for is providing mental therapy, mental health access to people who just don't have that access.
Absolutely.
You can get through it. But
Absolutely.
It's not going to be at the hands of your friends giving you advice to take a shower and go out for a walk and drink and you'll feel better today. Because it is such a misunderstood health condition that a lot of people don't know how to even have a dialogue with their friend or their loved one or family member.
Yes, but I think that it's a twofold issue. First, you have to, well, I don't know first or second, but you have to provide access, absolutely. But you have to change attitudes as well. Because in every community, there is still that stigma. And so, yes, the access is critical. Without that, you could be stuck for your life in that horrible feeling. But you have to have the attitude that, you know, if you broke your arm, you go to the hospital.
Is clinical depression one of the ailments? Sometimes when you think about the pain of going into labor, right? Yeah. Our bodies, our minds kind of forget. We know it hurt. We know it wasn't fun.
Yes.
But we don't remember the pain.
Yeah, or we'd never have another kid if we did.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
But when you stub your toe, you know exactly what that feels like.
Yeah.
I can remember right now what it feels like to stub my toe. So when you are going through clinical depression and that weight and that darkness and that heaviness that you're talking about, can you still tap into that feeling and feel it and put yourself there? Or is it one of those, like, it was so bad you forgot it?
I think your analogy is exactly right about childbirth. I can remember it. I can certainly empathize, because if someone tells me, I can say, I know how you feel because I have felt it. But no, I don't go back and bring up those feelings. Like anyone, I might have a day or two here or there, or just, Netflix, thank God for Netflix or Hulu or whatever. I don't want to advertise. But no, I don't have to relive the feeling, but I have the memory of it. And the memory of it is, how do I say this? I can have the memory without having the feeling. Thank God, because who would want to remember it if you could still drag up that feeling? I mean, memories like that in general, right? I mean, all kinds of things happen, and for all kinds of reasons, physiologically, psychologically, we remember, but we don't continue to feel. So I'm grateful for that.
Looking back and remembering that time in your life and looking where you are now,
Yes.
Can you believe that you've gone through all of these steps to get to where you are now, this life that you have now?
Sometimes I can't. I mean, seriously, I believe in serendipity, I think is the best way for me to describe it. The fact that our neighbor decided to hire me, and the fact that I realized that I really enjoyed doing that, and that I got my doctorate actually when I was 40, and then had a baby when I was 41, and just followed this path. And then, so, an academic path is pretty well laid out. But then to have the chair of the English department randomly walk into my office, I don't know, randomly, but serendipitously, let's say, and then present to me this opportunity, which, had I been the kind of person that was afraid of something that I didn't know how to do, I would have said no. But like I said earlier, I think you say yes and then you figure it out. And so I said yes and figured it out. And then that then created this whole, the plain language group, and this whole other part of my life that ran parallel to my professor life.
So you talk about having the parallel lives professionally.
Yes.
And I don't like to talk about women's personal lives when they are presenting their professional selves. But as a single mom for a very long time, I know there's a lot going on in the background too. Another parallel path. So how have you been able to balance your personal family life and these two professional tracks at the same time? And as you said, forging the way in spaces that women aren't traditionally in corporate America, telling lawyers what to do.
Yes. Number one, I have an extremely supportive husband who is a poet and an artist, and he's perfectly happy for me to go out there and become famous. And it's, frankly, my consulting life is lucrative. So I married a man who's not threatened by what I do and how I do it, not threatened by the fact that I travel. When our daughter was 6 months old, I went and gave a paper at a conference, and he had to be the dad, and, good. So that clearly was very helpful for me, is to have that kind of support. I also, because of the depression and therapy, had learned to be a very self-contained person. So I felt pretty confident about the choices that I was making as I was going along. And my husband also, I'm so lucky, really, in so many ways. My husband was also a professor. And we used to say to each other, how do people who have 8 to 5 jobs do it with kids? And how do they find time to go to the dentist and the grocery store? And I think single mothers are the saints of the world. You want to give a Nobel Peace Prize to somebody, give it to single mothers, because what they have to do to raise good children is extraordinary. So I had a partner who was a good father, and so that was very helpful. But I think I'm my best supporter, you know, and one of the things I learned from those years of the depression, and intermittently I have my tune-ups with my therapist, is I really like myself. I really think I'm a really smart, funny, good person, not perfect, you know, sometimes good enough is good enough, but I really like myself. And that makes a huge difference when you really feel like you like yourself and your own company. So
Is there a switch? Because I know this is going to resonate with a lot of women.
Yeah.
I know it is. Because I'm even like, wow, okay, where's the book on that, the manual on that? Because I think so many women walk around, I'm my own worst critic.
Yes, of course.
We've got to change that language.
Oh, of course.
So was there a moment, a switch, a time, an experience? When do women get there? What is the process, you know, of not being your own worst critic, being your own best fan?
Well, I don't know that I can say there was a particular experience. I do know there was a point where I realized, sounds very egotistical, again, I have to qualify because I'm a woman, where I realized that my good enough was better than a lot of people's best. And in an academic environment, I will tell you this, there's just politics are just as rampant as they are in anything else. And I would sit in meetings where I would see that what I said did not resonate at all until the guy, you know, 3 chairs down said it. And I was like in my 40s, I did not have a normal academic life. I got a master's degree and then I went off and had another life, and I didn't come back into academia for, I don't know, 12, 15 years. So I was a grown-up. And I also wasn't Southern. So therefore, I grew up in a family where people were a lot more direct about arguments and things. So anyway, I was able to stand up for myself. And that was something that I taught my daughter. And I think when you learn to stand up for yourself, it helps you like yourself better because you know that you can take care of yourself emotionally. So I don't, you know, I mean, I still have doubts, of course. I mean, you know, 2 or 3 times today I've had to qualify what I said, right? But I just think it was a series of events, the serendipitous, you know, getting articles published, winning award, all of that sort of stuff reinforced things for me. And then at a certain point, because of my age, then I just didn't care about that anymore, in a sense that I didn't need all of that external validation. Because when you don't feel good about yourself, you seek validation, I think, constantly. And of course, I, you know, need some of it, of course, I'm human, but I don't, that's not what gives me my sense of self-worth. So, but it's therapy. To be really truthful with you, therapy, it should be a requirement for everybody. Never mind depression, just therapy, right?
For sure.
Because
mental wellness. Just mental wellness.
Yes, it's mental, exactly. That's exactly the right term. And being self-aware. But the problem is that we don't all have the same resources, right? And we don't all have the same opportunities. And I think that is a society failing. It is not a level playing field. And I love that cartoon where it says equality, and there are 3 people standing on boxes looking over a fence, but they're different heights, and so even with the same size box, they can't all see over their fence. And then the next cartoon says equity, and the size of the box is bigger or smaller depending on the size of the person. And so equity is, you know, a level playing field, or at least the opportunities for more people to have opportunities, I think is just really critical.
I love that you referenced that cartoon. It's used by a colleague of mine and I in a workshop, and she is a Black woman, and she pointed out, why don't they just knock down the fence?
There you go. Even better.
It's fascinating how even when we think about making things even for everybody to run the race and have a chance, we're still maybe missing an opportunity to truly make it equal.
Absolutely.
And truly make it accessible for all. Because, I mean, ultimately, there's so many. And now when you look at that cartoon next time, you'll see, too, all the different ways. Because all the people are fully abled bodies.
Yes.
So, and where they're standing to watch the game. Why are they so far away? Why can't they be closer? Why can't they be in the game?
Well, and
it's such a deep cartoon. I love it. I love thinking about that. And then applying that to how we can change our lives and work to make things better for other people. And
and you know, and here we are, two white women having this conversation, right? So, I mean, we can't deny that, right? I happen to be Jewish, so I think I have a little bit more of a sense of what it means to walk into a room and hear somebody say something anti-Semitic, right? But it doesn't, as far as I know, get in the way, right? It's because nobody knows unless I announce, right? So, yes, knock down the fence. That's great. And see, it's those kind of statements that she made that immediately make us see things differently. Because I will never look at that cartoon the same way again, ever.
She's a phenomenal woman. It's Coach Kami. She's here in Charlotte. And she's opened my eyes up so much to these kinds of conversations, to look at it differently. I so admire your professional journey, parallel to your personal struggles, parallel to your personal life, because I think women are expected to segregate. And you do it so eloquently without ignoring a part of it. Because sometimes I think, well, how do I shut that off? How do we shut that off and not bring it into our work lives, you know?
Well, and you know, because I didn't work in a corporate environment, thank God, I did not have to do that. One of my goals for myself, because this can be an obstacle, was to decrease the space between my authentic self and my public self. And so when I show up, even with my clients, I show up as me. Wow. If I were in some kind of corporate environment, or maybe even just where I had a boss, that space gets bigger. And I think that that's an obstacle, to have a big space between your authentic self and your public self. And so, you know, for me, it was really important to decrease. Now, it didn't happen in my 30s or 40s, right? That's something that comes with age. But showing up as who you are also helps you like yourself.
And that's another goal of our video series. We want women to see people who look like them in jobs that they may want to do.
Yes.
Because everyone will say, oh, you should be a teacher, but maybe that's not what you want to be. You want to be an astronaut. It helps if you see a woman astronaut.
Absolutely.
You know, for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much for sharing so candidly and openly. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
I think that will be very helpful.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
With every guest we have on the She Dreams in Color video series, we like to have a t-shirt from a nonprofit that highlights the obstacle the woman talked about. And today's t-shirt is from the Charlotte-based nonprofit Eustress. It says, check on your strong, check on your friend. We know that sometimes the strongest among us are suffering in silence. And so make sure you reach out to people in your life and just do a wellness check. And then make sure you also have resources that you can provide to them should they say they need help. Eustress is a great organization here in Charlotte doing work to preserve and improve mental wellness. They predominantly focus on underserved communities, and they have a lot of programs for the Black community and specifically Black men.
It's our turn, won't let it burn. It's our turn, won't